ሰላም ንዓኹም ኣብ ርሑቕን ቀረባን ኮንኩም መደባትና ንትከታተሉ ኣባላት ኤሪትሪያን ኮሚኒቲ ከምኡውን ተቐማጦ ካልጋርን ከባቢኣን ንሎማዓንቲ መቐፀልታቲ በቐዳማይ ብዛዕባ ካናዳ ዘውፅኦ ሓድሽ ናይ ኢሚግሬሽን ሕግታት ንዑ ዝምልከት መደብ ሒዝናልኩም ቀሪብና ኣለና ንሎሚ ሒዘልኩም መፅእ ዘለኹ ጋሻ ኣብ ቅድሜና ዘላ ወይዘሮ አንቶኔት ትበሃል ምስ ኣብ ናይ ስፖንሰርሺፕ ንነዊሕ ዓመታት ተሞክሮ ዘለዋ ከምኡውን ነዝናትና ኮሚኒቲ ንነዊሕ ዓመታት ምስ ስፖንሰርሺፕ ዝምልከት ጉዳያት ክትተሓባበር ዝፀንሐት ኣብ ኮሚኒቲና ከም ኣዲ ኤርትራውያን እትፍለጥን እትኽበርን ወይዘሮ አንቶኔት ሒዘልኩም ቀሪበ ዘለኹ ኣብዚ ናይ ሎሚ መደብ እዚ ምሳና ሓቢርኩም ክትከታተሉ ንኹላትኩም ዕድመኩም Welcome to our today's program, Mrs. Antoinette. I was just introducing our today's program and who you are, so that they would know. But I would love to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself with the Eritrean community and with our viewers, please.
Thank you, Jonas, for the opportunity to be able to speak to Eritreans in Calgary and maybe even beyond.
Yes.
Calgary. And thank you to the Eritrean Association of Calgary for inviting me to be in your program. This is quite an honor to be here.
Thank you.
So my name is Antoinette Godbout, and I am now retired, but I did managed the refugee sponsorship program for Calgary Catholic Immigration Society and the Roman Catholic Diocese of Calgary for 35 years. So from 1987 until I retired in 2022.
Yes, please.
So it was a very long career and a very enjoyable one. I felt it was an answer to prayer when I was young and looking for what I would do in my life, and so to get into refugee sponsorship work was a real privilege and a real joy in my life. In those 35 years, I don't know how many refugees that I applied for, but it would have been probably maybe 8,000, but I know from our statistics that 7,000 refugees arrived during the time that I was looking after the sponsorship program. So that is a big number.
Yes.
And the program at CCIS was one of the largest in Canada, largest sponsorship programs. And certainly the largest program in Calgary. Now, the Eritrean Association is the largest sponsor in Calgary. So you have outgrown CCIS. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Antoinette. As we love to call you and the community, we give you the name the Mother Teresa of Eritreans. Yes. So just to shed some light on that, when did you start helping Eritreans resettle in Canada, and how was it?
That would have been in the late 80s, and very soon after, all of the trouble began in Eritrea.
Yes.
So from the late 80s, of course, up to the present. And the Eritreans became, today, the largest refugee community that we help, because Eritreans are very hardworking people, very devoted to their families, to faith, to helping all of the Eritreans who were left behind. So they persisted every year. They were waiting for the sponsorship program to open. So every year I found myself increasing the number of Eritreans that we were helping. And I believe it still is the largest group that CCIS is helping today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. We hear a lot from different Eritreans within Calgary that frequently mention your name as a person who at some point of their life helped them, and now they're able to live the life they're living. So we would really love to appreciate your work and your help with Eritreans here. The other question I would love to ask is during your time in CCIS, keeping in mind that CCIS is one of the organizations that we are working hand in hand when it comes to sponsorship, the settlement of the newcomers and then the refugees. So during your time in CCIS, how were you able to contribute to the growth of the relationship between the Eritrean Association in Calgary and CCIS, and from that relationship between these two organizations, what were the good outcomes that helped Eritreans resettle here?
Every year, sponsorship programs across Canada receive spaces. We call them spaces, or spots. And so Canada Immigration decides how many immigrants they will bring every year, which is in the thousands. And then they set different programs. They call them programs within that total number of immigrants that they bring in. So refugees is one of the programs where they admit immigrants to Canada. So then all of the sponsors across Canada, what we call sponsorship agreement holders. So they are organizations that have a legal agreement with Canada Immigration to sponsor refugees, meaning they can name the refugees that they bring in. So each of us, whether it's CCIS or the Eritrean Association, and it's now 136 sponsorship agreement holders across Canada, each of us is given a number of spaces. So I always asked for a large number, as many as I could handle. Some years, the biggest years when I was looking after the program, 300. I would ask for 300 spaces.
Yes.
So there were only 2 of us working in the sponsorship program at CCIS. So there was a limit as to how many we could handle. And so 300 was quite a large number. And as time went on, immigration complicated our work.
Yes.
So we had, it took more effort to submit a sponsorship application. So we had to decrease the number, but I don't remember that we went below 250 every year. And so Eritreans made up 1/3 typically of that total number. And of course we were dealing with other refugee groups such as Syria and Iraq were very big groups as well, but not as big as the Eritreans. And we had some from Afghanistan, Tibet, more countries. I won't try to remember them all now, but over the years we would have dealt with probably 15 different countries, that what we call refugee-producing countries.
Okay.
And so the Eritreans always made up a big part of that number that we sponsored.
Okay. Thank you so much. So, in relation with your experience, your 35 years of experience in dealing with refugees and sponsorship, I would love for you to explain the new program framework that the Canada immigration has come with, so that we all have a proper understanding of the framework or the new rules that Canada immigration is trying to implement on the sponsorship agreement holders. We've tried to shed some light on it and do some explanation on our previous interview with our Eccac director, Surafael, and with Mr. Ahmed. But now we're going to dig deep into it a little bit, and I would love to give you the opportunity to explain to us, what does Canada immigration mean by program integrity framework? Are we supposed to be scared? Are we supposed to be happy about it? So I'm going to leave it to you to go through that, and hopefully we have a proper understanding of the framework. Thank you.
By the time I'm done, Jonas, you should be really scared.
Yes. Okay.
I'm teasing.
Okay.
No. What Canada immigration wants is improvements to be made in the program. So all of these years, people like me and Surafiel and Joanna at CCIS now, every year all of our energy goes into submitting new applications. So that's good, because that's how refugees arrive here. But what happened is, after the refugees come into Canada, they also need attention to get settled and integrated into Canada. And because we were so focused on getting new applications done, that part of it, after they arrived, we didn't devote as much energy to resettling the refugees as we should have. And Canada immigration became aware of this. And they now, you also need to know that Canada's, what we call the Private Sponsorship of Refugees program, is known around the world, and it's very highly thought of. So the Canadian government and Canada Immigration, they go to conferences and political meetings around the world, and they talk about our private sponsorship program. The fact that every year we bring thousands of refugees, and the community, private people in the community, play a big role in bringing those refugees to Canada. Yes. So Canada Immigration wants the program to work well, to look good.
Yes.
They don't want stories of refugees coming in, and like right now we're hearing on the news, refugees who come across the Canadian border from the United States to Canada, they're called refugee claimants.
Yes.
And there's no housing. There's no place for them to live. So there's stories in the news that we have been watching that they're in big cities like Toronto. These refugees are sleeping under bridges and wherever in the city because there's no place for them to live. So this is a big embarrassment for Canada, and something that they're working on, to change that. But with the privately sponsored refugees who come from overseas and fly into Canada, they become permanent residents when they arrive here. And for those refugees, they don't want these stories of people not being looked after. So since 2018, they started this big program called Program Integrity Framework. And so whenever the government uses big words like this, where even Canadian-born people like me, we don't understand what that means, but we know that when the government uses these big fancy words, they want something to be done.
Yes.
Okay? And so we, after being in sponsorship for 35 years, when I hear big phrases like this, I know that we have to take them seriously. So in 2018, Canada Immigration began to talk about the Program Integrity Framework, and another big expression they used was risk, or they still are using, risk management.
Okay.
So again, these big words, they should scare you, Jonas. But
Okay.
what you have to do is say, well, so what does it mean, and what do we have to do as a result of these programs or these policies that Canada Immigration brings in?
Yes.
And so this actually has a good purpose, because it's important that when refugees arrive, that they have that opportunity to learn about Canada, learn how to function in English, be able to enjoy life somewhat after spending goodness knows how many years they spent, in a refugee camp, even in their home, back home in Eritrea.
Yes.
What was life like for them there?
Yes.
So after all of that, they should have the opportunity to become properly settled and receive the help that they need. So in 2018, Canada Immigration announced to all 130-something sponsorship organizations in Canada that they would be reviewing. They would be following up on some of the refugees that we were sponsoring. So the things that they would be looking for, that we had to start paying a lot of attention to, was how much money, how much financial support were they receiving from their sponsors. And then were they registering for English classes, and were they receiving orientation to the community? So a whole list of the things that typically are done with newly arrived refugees that they were going to, that they called it case review. So that'll come up here later. But when that means they send a letter to the sponsor the letter is right in the subject heading, is case review. And it has the name of some refugee family or individual that has been sponsored. And they have a list of questions that we have to answer. And we would have to send proof, such as a copy of their bank statement showing that they had received money from their sponsors. So when they introduced this in 2018, I said, how much, what is this going to mean for us? And there's only two of us working, me and Yo Sun, working in the program. And I called the Catholic Diocese in Toronto, which has also a very large refugee sponsorship program. I asked them, I said, what are you going to do? What have you been doing about this new policy from Canada Immigration to follow up on the refugees that are coming in? In Ontario, they have more of a problem with refugees applying for social services before that 1 year of sponsorship is over. So when we sponsor refugees, it comes with a 1 year period of responsibility where the organization, whether it's CCIS or Eccac, and their sponsor has to provide everything they need for a full year. At the end of that year, if the family they haven't been able to find work, they can't support themselves, then they can apply for provincial social services. So in Ontario, they had more of a problem with refugees that were sponsored going to social services within that first year. So they learned a long time ago that the only way they could keep themselves out of trouble with Canada Immigration was to collect a deposit, to collect money from the sponsors in advance. So they asked them to put a certain amount of money, to give it to the diocese in Toronto. And then when the refugee arrived, the sponsor or the diocese would give that financial support to the refugee every month. And so if immigration did a review, or if social services reported that somebody, a sponsored refugee, had gone to them, and so they reported this to Canada Immigration, and immigration contacted the sponsor, then they would have the money in the bank and say they would be able to show that they had supported them. So I learned from them, and I said, well, I'm going to implement the same policy right away because there's only 2 of us working in the program. We don't have time for a lot of problems. And so I started that in 2018.
Great.
And since then, Canada Immigration each year became more, they asked for more and more. And then they introduced their big expressions or phrases like program integrity framework. So that means immigration did a lot of work, at studying how they could have a system across Canada of following up with the sponsors to say, how well are you looking after the refugees that you brought in? So they introduced this to us, and we've had a lot of workshops on what it means and what we have to do. And so I wanted to have this flip chart to make information clear for people, because there's so much you can talk about. And I said, let's make sure we get the main points on paper so people can understand what we mean. So basically what I was saying, in immigration, Canada Immigration, IRCC, they have changed. They changed their policy. It's starting in 2018.
Yes.
And they have been improving on this PIF, we call it, PIF. Some of the Eritreans might have heard that expression already. Yes. We know it very well in the sponsorship world. And so each year since 2018, they have been making improvements in that program. And so they have changed their policy. And as a result, the sponsors also have to change. We don't have a choice.
Yes.
And the goal of the whole of the program integrity framework is that refugees will be settled, that they'll receive more when they arrive in Canada. It's making sponsors, whether it's their relatives who are sponsoring them or it's CCIS and Eccac, who are the sponsoring organizations behind it. It's making all of us aware we have to pay more attention and do a better job of helping the people coming in. So they set a date, October the 10th, 2023, which is next Tuesday. That is the date that they've been training us, and they're saying as of next October the 10th, we will start to implement program integrity framework. So that means that the sponsors, like the sponsoring organizations like Eccac and CCIS, will start to receive these case review letters. And meaning they will be asking us, how is this particular individual or family, how are they doing? Give us a report on how they're doing. So that's what we're here today to talk about, we want the Eritrean community to understand that it's creating extra work for all of us, but in the end, the final result is that refugees, whether they're Eritrean or some other nationality, they will be well looked after when they come in. And so we're hoping all of this goes well.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Yes.
The page.
Yes.
So I've already mentioned that who is responsible. So who has to do something about this new program, policies that immigration has introduced. So Eccac, I think everybody knows what Eccac is, the Eritrean Association. And I could have also put here CCIS and 136 sponsoring organizations across Canada.
Yes.
So we are all responsible as organizations. Co-sponsors are responsible as well. So they are the people that come to Eccac or CCIS and say, would you sponsor my brother, sister, parents, my cousin, my friend, whoever they want to bring to sponsor. So, and then the refugees themselves also have a responsibility when they arrive, that they have to follow the direction of Canada Immigration. When they say, look, we want you to go to CCIS or the Center for Newcomers for orientation, to start learning about your life in Canada. We want you to have a resettlement counselor, an employment counselor. We want you to go to an orientation session with these organizations. And so the refugees must be, ready to follow that direction and not say, oh, I don't really care. I just want to work. I have family back home that I want to support. And I don't want to spend time going to Eccac or going to CCIS, learning English, I'll be okay. And just let me do what I want to do. So that attitude is not going to work anymore. Okay, so all three levels in the process of people involved have to do, what they're obliged to do as sponsors. So the responsibilities, orientations, English classes, and getting integrated into Canadian society. So that there's many topics under those three major topics, but we'll just touch briefly on them. So they, after refugees arrive, they give them a little time to breathe and rest and feel this nice cold air in Canada. And then they want the sponsors and the refugees to get in touch with a settlement, what they call a service provider organization. So, yes. And the ones we know best are CCIS and the Center for Newcomers in Northeast Calgary. So these organizations receive a lot of funding to provide resettlement and employment service to newly arrived refugees. So this is a benefit that's available when refugees come in. And the immigration wants them to take advantage. That's why they give funding to CCIS and the Center for Newcomers. So, but if we don't ask them, if we don't if the refugees and their sponsors don't make themselves available, these organizations can't help. Yes. And so what we're doing now is to say to the newly arrived, we are going to follow up with you. We're going to make sure that you do contact these service organizations. And when you go there, they will do intake. They'll make a file for the newly arrived people. They will assign resettlement and employment counselors to all of the people who come in. And those counselors are responsible to help refugees with forms, and the big ones are the Canada Child Tax Benefit, and this letter, the fair entry letter, so that they can get a subsidized bus pass. Yes. And they are also responsible to ask the refugees and their sponsors, did you apply for your social insurance number, your Alberta healthcare number? Did you open a bank account? And then that counselor should help them get registered for an English class. Yes. And then in the orientation, they're going to talk about a lot of topics that help refugees get integrated into Canadian society. Great. But the business of English classes, that's one that a number of refugees say, I feel uncomfortable. We all feel uncomfortable having to learn a new language. And it's not what they want to do right after they arrive in Canada. What they need to know, though, is that, first of all, Canada Immigration wants refugees and all immigrants to learn English after they come in. So they expect them to register. And what I learned from CCIS today is that it takes 3 to 6 months to get into an English class. So when newcomers arrive, they should register. Even if they don't feel like it, they don't think they need or want to learn English, they should make themselves register for a class or register for their testing. So they'll go to the Language Assessment Center and get tested, and then they will assign them to the next English class that is available. So There's different waiting times depending on what level of English that the person is. But 3 to 6 months is quite typical now for most of the refugees who are coming in. So these are the 3 responsibilities that Canada Immigration expects the sponsors and the refugees to follow up on after they arrive. So then what will happen? As I mentioned earlier, with this new program integrity framework, case reviews will begin. Immigration has already been doing this with sponsors, but these will happen more regularly now. They're really, as of next week, there's going to be more of it'll be more consistent from Canada Immigration that they will send out these letters and asking sponsors to give them a mini report on how refugees are doing. So for a sponsor like the Eritrean Association, if you handle these case reviews well, if good reports go to immigration that yes, the refugees have been receiving money, their bank statements show that on a regular basis they're being given, it's called the minimum financial support. So if they say the minimum amount of support for a family of 4 people is this much. And so when you give them a report, you have to show that they have been receiving that minimum amount of financial support in their bank account. If Eccac does a good job of this, of explaining, of following up with the refugees who have arrived and contacting their sponsors, finding out, did they go to an orientation? Did they get into an English class? Are they receiving financial support? And employment, that would become important later on. But in the beginning, they want to see that initial support is being given to the refugee. So if Eccac does a good job with those case reviews, immigration will think you're a good sponsoring organization, and your ability to sponsor will go up. Okay, that next year, if you do a good job with case review, and you want to sponsor more refugees, you want your space, your number to be higher, they will say yes, you're eligible to have more spaces because you're doing a good job of sponsoring. On the other hand, this arrow pointing down means that if when you send in these reports about the refugees you've sponsored, if they haven't been receiving enough financial support, if they have not gone to an orientation, if they're not taking English classes, then immigration is going to say, this organization is not doing so well. And so next year, you might end up, if you ask for more spaces, you may not get them. And so that can have a big impact on Eccac as a sponsor, as it could have with CCIS or any other sponsoring organization across Canada. So that's why everybody has to take this program integrity framework. They have to take it seriously. Co-sponsors, when Eccac contacts a co-sponsor and says, immigration has given us a case review letter about the person you brought in. Can you tell us, can you show us how much support, financial support they have been receiving? We need a copy from, of their bank statement. And have they registered for English classes, and on, all of these kinds of issues that are so important to resettlement. And if the co-sponsors don't want to help, if they don't want to cooperate and say, yes, we're giving them financial support, here's the proof, yes, we have done all of the things we're supposed to do, they have a place to live, either they're living with their sponsor, they're living in their own apartment, they have furniture, they have clothing, all of these things. If they say, we're too busy, we're working, we don't want to give them more money, we don't care about that minimum financial support they're supposed to have, that is going to cause problems for the sponsors like Eccac.
Yes.
And at the end of the year, when you send, all of the sponsors have to send an annual report to immigration.
Yes.
And if in that report, Eccac says 25% or more of our sponsors really gave us a hard time. They didn't want to cooperate in this process of doing case review. So we don't know now. That question mark means immigration may take action against sponsors. We don't know that yet. We know what they're saying to the sponsorship organizations. It could impact the co-sponsors. So they need to be aware of that.
Yes.
And the other thing that will happen from all of this is that refugees that have arrived, they're going to lose opportunities. Okay?
Yes.
And we'll talk about what the opportunities are. But in the end, it means they're not going to get the care that they should receive. Now, I want to tell a little story here. I hope people are not falling asleep at this point with all of this instruction. But this story goes back about 4 years ago when I was still working at CCIS. And an Eritrean family of 5 or 6 people came to CCIS, asking for furniture. They said, we're newly arrived and we really need some furniture. And they heard from their friends that through the Catholic churches, CCIS was able to find furniture for a lot of refugee families. So we said, yes, for sure, we can help you. And so we contacted a group of volunteers from one of our churches and asked them to give the family furniture. The volunteers went out to the home of this Eritrean family, which they do with every family they help. They go out and they take measurements on how much furniture, how big, and what can they fit in, and is there an elevator, and all of these questions. And when they arrived at the place where this family was living, it was a basement apartment.
Yes.
And when they stepped in, they said there was nothing in the apartment. They had no furniture. Even in the kitchen, there were very few dishes or food. They said, we had never met a family as poor as this one. And this was in the month of March, when it's still winter, it's cold, and they were sleeping on the floor in this basement apartment on a cold floor. So they came back, they told us this, and we said, my goodness, we better talk to their sponsors. So the family came in again and we said, we would like to talk to your sponsor. And they said, no. And I wasn't there, I wasn't whoever their Tigrinya speaking counselor had a bigger conversation with them. But the final analysis was, do not contact our sponsors. If you have to do that, just leave us alone. Don't give us anything. So we respected that. We said, we understand what that could mean for them. They must have had an arrangement where their sponsors brought them in on the condition that that family would not ask them for anything after they arrived. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the church provided them with everything that they needed. But that's the kind of story that Canada Immigration does not want happening. They don't want any of these arrangements or agreements between sponsors and refugees where the refugee cannot ask for help. They're on their own, and they end up sleeping in cold places. They do without many things until they finally get a job and earn their own money, or a relative somewhere in the world is sending money to them. So immigration, they have experienced this before, and that's why they introduced the program integrity framework to say we can't have this anymore. So those are the things that newly arrived, what they lose, the opportunities they lose. So when sponsors are doing what they're supposed to do, Eccac, CCIS, all the sponsors across Canada, and their relatives or the co-sponsors who bring them, what happens is they'll have a better chance to get into jobs. Okay, and they'll have an employment counselor. The relatives will also help them. They will have job training opportunities. So Canada Immigration says, we want to train the people we bring in. When we need more people working in the electrical world, in construction, in plumbing, in whatever of the trades, especially out there where they have a shortage of skilled workers, they will create and pay for expensive training programs. And organizations like CCIS and the Center for Newcomers will receive the funding to manage those programs, those training programs. So refugees can take advantage of training.
Yes.
Now, what goes with job training is often English. That you need a certain level, of level 3 or 4 of English in order to benefit from the training that goes on. So that's where, if refugees start taking English classes and when a training program becomes available, they'll be eligible for it. And so then if they have studied English, after a minimum of 3 years in Canada, 3 out of 5 years, they can apply for citizenship. And they need a level 4 of English in order to be eligible to become citizens. So again, that's where studying English is going to help them. And it's going to increase their self-confidence. I have met clients who came to me looking for sponsorship, and they had been here 4, 5, 6 more years, and they had difficulty talking to me in English after that many years in Canada. And so, and you could see their sense of their self-worth, their self-confidence, it was still low. Because they didn't want to study, they avoided, they were working several jobs, so they had earned money and they had sent it back to family back home and in refugee camps, but themselves, they were still at a handicapped level in that they just couldn't communicate well in English. And then I didn't know what to call this. I called it respect within families, okay? So what we don't want happening is that when parents bring children, often the children are very young when they arrive, and things are okay at that level. The children, they have a good relationship with their kids. As time goes on, the children go to school and they begin to learn. They become fluent in English. If the parents have not done that, if they have not studied and developed their ability to, just to talk to people in the community, to go out and become effective in dealing with different businesses and schools and organizations. So if the parents don't have that level of English, and with it they don't have a lot of self-confidence, the children soon begin to think they are smarter than the parents. They're way ahead of the parents. They can see the lack of confidence. And the children may decide that they're too big and too smart for the parents. Or the children also might develop a very poor sense of self-worth. They may also be lacking in self-confidence. They go to school, they have problems at school. The parents may not know how to help them deal with all the issues that come with going to school. So it can result in, a very poor development for the children. So the whole family begins to suffer.
Yes.
And so we don't want that to happen. So that, for all the co-sponsors out there, think about all of these things when you sponsor somebody and you're too busy, you're working too hard, you don't have time. Think about the long-term implications when that kind of development doesn't happen when refugees come in. The whole family and youth can be very negatively affected by all of that. So, what does everybody have to do?
Yes.
What are our marching orders? So, for the sponsors and for the newcomers who've come in, the refugees, you need to get in touch with CCIS or the Center for Newcomers. Register with them as new clients. You can just call, you can even drop in. So these organizations know that it's their job, that they receive funding to help newly arrived refugees. So they're going to go out of their way. If you drop in, they're going to try to, do intake that very day.
Yes.
If they can't, they will make other arrangements. So contact one of these organizations, and once they make a file for the newly arrived family or individual, they're going to refer them to settlement, resettlement, and employment counselors.
Yes.
Those counselors are extremely busy these days because so many refugees have been admitted to Canada, along with all of immigrants in general. The number is so high. However, they too know that their job is to help these newcomers get settled properly. So they're going to look into all of the different areas of resettlement. Employment counselors are going to be looking not only at jobs, but the possibility of job training. So these people, if you get in touch and you follow up with them, they will do their job. And coming back to sponsors like Eccac, the Eritrean Association, it's your job to follow up with these counselors as well, and be sure that all the service that they're able to provide is being provided. So it takes everybody in the loop to make sure that proper resettlement gets done. And so what we're doing now, many Eritreans have been going to CCIS for the orientations that happen every Wednesday. And what's happening is there's too many people crowded into the room. So we have learned that the orientations need to happen with, I think the number is about 15 people is the ideal. So what we offered to CCIS, we said, let's do an orientation right here at Eccac. And we'll do them once a month or more if necessary, depending on how many people are coming in every month. So what we're asking people to do, is go to CCIS or the Center for Newcomers to register, become a client, work with the resettlement and employment counselors, and come to the orientation that Eccac is going to organize every month, which will be, it's 4 or 5 hours of information that is really interesting and that will really be helpful for the refugees to get settled.
Okay. Yes.
There we are.
Thank you so much,
I think
Antoinette.
we're done.
Yes. Thank you so much. I have been able to see the good use of the program integrity framework, they have called it. I can see how it can benefit the organization, at the same time the co-sponsors, and at large the refugees, so that their Canada is home, and then they can resettle properly. And on the other side, if we do not implement it properly and do not follow it as we should, I can see it can be very disastrous. So it is a very good informative presentation that we had from you. I can see the 35 years of experience.
I learned something in all those years.
Yes, please. So I hope everybody gets hold of this, and they try to be everybody who's responsible tries to be very serious with it, and the Eritrean community will keep on trying to fulfill what this framework requires of us, so that our community members are safe, our community is safe, and refugees that come to Canada resettle properly. I would love to thank you on behalf of the Eritrean community and all the Eritreans that you've been able to change their lives, or be a reason for them to come and resettle here in order to change their lives. Thank you so much. Your service, your contribution in our community is highly appreciated. Thank you so much. ክቡራትን ክቡራንን ተዓዘብትና ስለቲ ዝነበረና ጸንሖታት ዚና ኢና ነመስግን ንሎሚ ዝነበረና መደብ ኣብዚ ንዛዝም ኣብ ካልእ ቀፂሉ ዝስዕብ መደባትና ደጊምና ክሳብ ንራኸብ ንኹላትኩም ሰላም ይምነ ብሮም ምሸት